Let's get the easy stuff out of the way. She looked like Jackie, but Donald Trump ain't no Jack Kennedy. I never knew Jack Kennedy. He was never a friend of mine. But Donald Trump, you ain't no Jack Kennedy. That was possibly the worst inauguration speech ever delivered from the steps of the Capitol. And I'm not just talking about the vainglorious idiocy of much of the content. I'm talking about the murder of the English language that was watched across the globe by hundreds of millions of people. This man can scarcely string two sentences together. He scarcely ever completes a sentence, and I don't know if he will be able to complete his term of office. It was vulgar, brash, ugly, all the things that we know already about Donald Trump. And in that regard, he is a marked contrast to his predecessor, all sharply suited, lean, handsome, and as articulate, indeed poetic, as it's possible for a president to be. But you know what? I can't share the wallowing in nostalgia for the Barack Obama presidency. And I can't for 1 second countenance that it would have been better for America and the world if Hillary Clinton had been elected instead. I said right from the start that this was a contest between two evils, but the greater of the evils was standing there in the audience this afternoon by the name of Hillary Rodham Clinton. But no need to mention her much, although her supporters disgraced themselves in many parts of the protest today and will have damaged the Democratic Party still further by the petty, puerile protest that they mounted, smashing people's windows, setting fire to their trash cans, and demanding that the new president not be allowed to take office, showing yet again how they imagine that the elite, the entitled, can never be allowed to be disinherited, can never be allowed to lose power. Now I'll come on to the prospects for Trump in a minute, but let me continue my critique of the speech. He stated in front of this worldwide audience he was going to eradicate from the face of the earth Islamic fundamentalist terrorism. Well, that's just not clever. As Donald Trump might put it in a tweet, not good, not good. First of all, because the definition of that in Donald Trump's mind is very unclear. Secondly, because it's a very difficult thing to achieve. And thirdly, the signs are that he intends to continue with some, if not many, of the foreign policies of the United States that have created, sustained, enlarged, inflated, multiplied the scourge of fanatic Islamist extremist terrorism. If he moves the American embassy from Tel Aviv, where everybody in the world's embassies are, to illegally occupied Jerusalem, how much radicalization, fanaticization do you think that's going to cause? If he continues Barack Obama's policy of pouring untold, uncountable tens, scores of billions of dollars of aid every year in money and weapons to Israel to occupy Jerusalem and crush the Palestinian people and wipe them off the face of the earth. How much of a boost to the fanatic, heart-eating, throat-cutting, head-chopping extremist terrorists do you think that that is going to provide? It was an ugly speech. It was, in some places, grotesquely badly expressed. But under all of that, I've got to tell you that in the American heartland this evening, most Americans will be seeing things very differently from the liberal commentators in the bubble that so many of us have had to listen to all day. These snooty, snobbish, sneering seers that got it all wrong. All the experts that told us that Brexit could never win. All the geniuses that told us that Trump could never be the candidate. If the candidate could never win, they all got it wrong because they don't understand that ordinary working people in America, in Britain, in Italy, in France, in the Netherlands, all over the developed world are hurting at the utter, abysmal failure of the neoliberal economics of the elite. Neoliberal economics that have produced austerity, urban and industrial dereliction for the vast majority, whilst lining the pockets, indeed stuffing the mouths of the richest people. 61 people, 61 own more wealth in this world than half of the population of the earth. That is 361 billion people have less wealth than 61 of the richest people. Now, Trump may be completely insincere when he rails against the elite. Nigel Farage may be completely insincere. They may be. They may do nothing about it. But their words are like manna from heaven to those who have been nursing their wrath as they were talked down to, governed down to, by people they didn't elect, by people they couldn't remove, and people who thought their entitlement to power was absolute. So, Barack Obama killed 80 people today in Libya. He dropped a bomb every 20 minutes. Every 20 minutes of the last 8 years. He put his country on a collision course with Russia, which could have led to World War III. He engineered and paid for coups against elected governments in the Ukraine, in Brazil. He tried to overthrow the regime in Syria. He did overthrow the regime in Libya. I could, believe me, go on and on. So don't ask me to lament the passing from office of a guy just because he looked nice, just because he dressed nice, just because his wife was nice, because his children were nice. Don't ask me to be sorry that Obama is gone because he could talk in professorial sentences, because the sentences of death and destruction that he signed for much of the world is one of the reasons why I'm glad to see the back of him and see the back of the Clintons and the other neoliberal elites. And guess what? I'm not alone. The forces that propelled the victory of Brexit and the victory of Trump are still on the march. They are not finished yet, and they have victories still to win. Right throughout the speech of President Trump in the inauguration today were hostages to fortune, being scattered with, shall I say, gay abandon all over the place. He's going to eradicate Islamist fundamentalist terrorism from the face of the earth. There'll be no more empty talk. No talk, only action. Well, we'll see. I hope so. It'll be good for the United States if it's true. It'll be crushing for the political system in the United States if, having marched all those people up to the top of the hill, Trump is forced to march them all, or at least himself, down again. 0344 499 1000. Now, 8 years ago, I talked to my friend, my next guest, about the presidency just begun of Barack Hussein Obama. He's been something of a disappointment. John and I don't see eye to eye on every matter, but I always want to hear his take on things, and I know that you do too. So let's welcome John Le Boutillier, former Republican congressman and now fellow host himself on Fox News. So we've got quite a bit in common now, John. Go ahead. What's your take on this day in 2017 in Washington, D.C.?
Well, George, good afternoon. Good evening.
Good evening.
To me, the thing we judge these inaugurations by really is the speech that the president gives, and watching and listening to that speech as it was going on, I kept saying to myself, well, this could have been given in the South Carolina primary a year ago.
Yeah.
It was an absolute rerun of his campaign speeches. No attempt in any way, symbolically or rhetorically, to reach out to the other side in our political system, the other half of the country that doesn't like him. He had Hillary Clinton sitting right behind him. He could have made a one-sentence reference to her service to America as an attempt to reach out to those people who didn't vote for him. He didn't do any of that. He was pugnacious in attitude and words, and was very true to the people who like him. They love the speech. So for them, they're very happy. But no attempt to expand the amount of people that like him. And I think that in the long run, that will be a hallmark of his presidency, that he didn't really give a damn about the other half of the country. He only was talking to his supporters.
What is clear is that he does things differently, John, differently to you and me if we had been in his position, differently from more or less all of his predecessors, right down to the fact that obviously nobody helped him with that speech, because if they had, there might have been a bit more poetry in it. There might have been some historical reference, grasp, echo. There might have been some nice words, some mellifluous words. It wouldn't have been as ugly and as brash and as pugnacious as you put it. So he clearly wrote it himself. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's raw. Maybe it's authentic.
Well, yeah, maybe that's it. But it goes hand in hand with the last 2 months of the transition since the election. Normally, a first thing that always happens in our transitions is the winner meets with the loser. As a scene as it's a photo op, a half-hour meeting, but it's always done to show the unity of our two parties, our system, that everybody's getting along and work for the good of the country. That didn't happen since the election. He's never had a meeting with Hillary Clinton. And I think that's a mistake. And I think that he's used most of these 2 months to exacerbate the wounds from the election. Instead of trying to heal the wounds, he hasn't done that. He's done the opposite. He's kept campaigning, kept trashing crooked Hillary, kept replaying the election and how I beat this and that. And the result, George, sitting here today, the day that this guy's sworn in, he's got the most dismal poll ratings of an incoming president we've ever seen. And different polls that taken this week, he's got in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll 38% approval, Monmouth University 34%, and CBS 32%. At the same time, 8 years ago, Barack Obama was at 79% approval. Back in 2001, I can't do my math, I guess that's 16 years ago, George W. Bush, despite that Florida recount and all that trouble, he was at 60% when he was sworn in. Trump's at 35%. And the reason is his behavior.
Well, but to be fair, John, the other side have not given him a moment's peace. I mean, they haven't accepted his victory. For them, he's illegitimate. He's a spy. He's a Russian agent. Who translated your address from the original Russian and all of that? CNN, game role-playing. What would happen if a disaster occurred on the stage today? An Obama official,
terrible,
and so on. It's,
terrible stuff.
I mean,
terrible
it's not
stuff.
just Trump that's been hyping it up.
No, but after the look, the demonstrations happened right after the election, and he did once on 60 Minutes tell people to stop that. That was what, but he made no attempt. And that Russian thing was not a big issue in November after the election. It's come on since then.
Yeah.
But early on, it wasn't a big deal. He made no attempt, in my view, to reach out to the other side. Doesn't mean he has to give in to them. It just means the atmospherics of less hostility, more unity, I think would help him in the long run. And he's doing, in a funny way, exactly what the Democrats did in Obamacare. When they did Obamacare in 2010, they basically said, screw you to the Republicans, and we're going to do the bill. We run the House and the Senate. We don't need you. We're going to do the bill our way. Okay, they got it passed. But guess what? Because of the way they did it, they ended up losing the House and the Senate in subsequent elections. Now they've lost the White House. And the Republicans have everything. And now the Republicans are saying, screw you, we're not even going to talk to you guys. We don't care. We don't need you. We can pass anything we want, and we can confirm anybody we want, and we don't need you. And that's the result of this behavior on both sides. And it's stupid in the long run. It is smarter in our system, and maybe yours, I don't know really, but in our system, to have both parties share in the product. If they both share, you take a lot of the partisan politics out of it.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely a sign that it isn't going to be political business as usual. And that might be the zeitgeist across the world, John, that this cozy, scratching each other's back, pretending that we love each other and we're colleagues across the aisle and so on. It may be that we've come to the end of that era. It might be we're in for a less gentle era in politics.
Well, it may very well be, but in the long run, it doesn't work. Now, the Democrats are waking up and realizing it doesn't work. They've lost everything because of going their own way. And now the Republicans have everything. By the way, the Republicans had everything in 01 and 2 and 3 and 4. George W. Bush, Republican House and Senate, they rammed stuff through. And by 06, they had lost the House and the Senate. And by 08, they lost the White House, too. So they already tried that. What I know about our system here, which I can speak about, is that when one party controls everything, one thing then always happens. They overreach. Yeah. They overdo it. And they end up blowing it.
I'm with you on that.
Our system... Yeah, and our system is built on the way you guys treated us before we were a country, and we built in this beautiful thing, checks and balances, to make sure nobody has absolute power in our system.
I wish we had it.
Trump has absolute power, you know.
John, it's been a pleasure. We'll talk again soon. I just know that if God spares us both. Thanks a lot. John Le Boutillier, former Republican congressman, the sage across the sea.
I started singing bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy.
Together, we will make America strong again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
03444991000. I wish they wouldn't appropriate the entire American continent unto themselves. They are not America. They are the United States of America. There's North America, there's Central America, there's Latin America, and hey, Donald, you're not their president. Let's take the first call because lots of people are trying to get on. Jamal is in Leeds. Let's hear from him. Jamal, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. George. How are you doing today? You okay?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Yes. What would you like to say?
The only thing I wanted to say is what happened today is we knew this was going to happen sooner or later. And the difference between him and Clinton is this person, for some reason, like from my point of view, he's more better than the Clinton. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I don't see him making a lot of wars around the world and a lot of trouble, even though majority of these senates or a lot of these so-called presidents around the world are corrupt. So even though is a bad thing for the world, at the same time, I do agree him taking over the White House compared to the Clinton, which is, I think, is probably 100 times more corrupt or worse than Trump.
Well, I'm not sure about the corruption because Donald certainly seems to like his gold and glitter, but I've absolutely no doubt that you're right about the danger to the world. Now, Trump might actually start wars. He might, but that's a bit better than Hillary Clinton, who we knew would, who ran for office on the promise that she would. You knew she was going to make war throughout the world. You don't know that Trump will. And if he actually resets relations between America and Russia, well, the world will be a much safer place and a better one. Jamal, thanks for the call. Norma is in Bristol. Let's hear from her. Go ahead, Norma.
Hello, George.
Hi.
It's not very long, my speech, or my little contribution. I only gave it 5 out of 10 for Trump's speech. I was disappointed with the whole of the ceremony. And what worried me, what I didn't like was that I think Trump thinks that, you know, God puts USA first. Now...
But they all think that, Norma.
Yeah, but listen, George.
American exceptionalism, God's greatest country on God's green earth and all this hogwash. They really do think they are something special. All of them do.
But the thing is, what came to mind was just a little song that they sing sometimes, and it goes, you know, heal the world, make it a better place for me and for you, and for all the human race. And those are my feelings, and it just annoyed me. He's got too much power.
Well, as John Le Boutillier was just pointing out, in fact, the American president is not all-powerful. He's very powerful, but he's not all-powerful. And his party controls both houses of Congress now, that's true, but by no means all of his party is behind him. And one of the things about America is that the electoral cycle begins more or less immediately now. So Trump is already running for his next term. The Congress faces elections every year. The governors, all the political class are perpetually in motion. And to some extent, their own electoral fortunes will depend upon their relationship to or against Donald Trump. So I'll tell you what's definitely true, Norma. The next 4 years are going to be very, very interesting. Thanks for the call. Simon is in London. He's up next. Go ahead, Simon.
Good evening, George Galloway.
Yes, good evening to you.
I'm calling to discuss Barack Obama's legacy and his 8 years.
Yes.
Most people assume that he was a resounding failure, but it's the exact opposite. What happened was, as Minister Louis Farrakhan stated before he got elected, that Obama was selected before he was elected. He was brought in by very powerful people to perform a job. What people didn't realize is the American public were becoming too awake and aware, and a revolt was about to take place after George Bush because of the failures in wars and economy. And what this resulted in was the elite parachuting in a gentleman who could pacify everybody with his words. So what we had was a beautiful and handsome face of a very ugly empire installed to make sure the American public, regardless of how many crimes Obama and the American state committed, the public wouldn't really challenge them or rise up against it. And we saw this perfectly executed with the Wall Street bailouts. If we had somebody like John McCain or George Bush try to execute their bailouts, there would have been a mass revolt. But because it was an individual like Barack Obama, who's handsome, who's a talented young black man, people didn't really have the guts or the gumption to protest or to take up a stand. Perfect example of this is during Bush's day, the anti-war lobby in America was going from leaps and bounds. As soon as Barack Obama came in, an end got installed onto any progressive offshoots of opposition to the deep state. So in my view, he was a resounding success. He executed everything they wanted of him, and then he sprinkled a little bit here and there with Obamacare and also with nuclear with Iran and the peace with Cuba.
Well, I think the last points that you made make the rest of what you said just look a little too much like a conspiracy theory, Simon. Let's start with his selection, not election. This is false. Obama had to fight tooth and nail to become the Democratic Party nominee. He was absolutely opposed by the power in the party. I know because I followed it very, very closely at the time, and I was an advocate of his here on the radio, and it was by no means certain that he would become the president. And at the end of his term, on the last day, for example, the second last day, he made a speech about Israel-Palestine, which if he had made at the beginning of his term and acted on, could have made the world a much safer and more just place.
I agree with you.
His recognition of Cuba is opposed by most of the deep state in America. His conclusion of the Iran nuclear deal was opposed by most of the deep state. So, whilst of course you're onto something, and much of what you said I agree with, the reality is politics doesn't work in quite such a linear way as you have suggested. Go on.
I would like to add, what people need to do is follow the money. He was one of the individuals that raised the most amounts of money.
No, no, you're wrong, Simon. He raised his money from small donors in the beginning. It's true that when it looked like he could win, the Coca-Colas and the rest came in.
And
but in the beginning, he was miles behind his opponents in fundraising.
I agree with you, but this is it. They saw the opportunity that there was an individual who they could use, and they jumped on board and gave him the money and propelled him past Hillary Clinton. Because at first, before everybody took notice of him, Hillary Clinton was their favored individual. But they couldn't have done what they done with Obama with Clinton, and they knew this. So when it came to the most decisive time, they cut her loose for the moment in time and put their money in him in order for him to do what he should do. But if I could quickly move on to Trump, I fear that his speech today was an indication of what's to come. And this is going to be war with Iran, unfortunately. The reason I say so, already from the words that he's used, some of the senior people who he selected have started to label Iran as the source and the expander of Islamic terrorism in the world. This is absolutely false. Everybody knows it's Saudi Arabia, but they're trying to attach Iran with Islamic fundamentalism. Trump is in bed with Netanyahu. He's willing to do anything with Netanyahu, as he's ridiculously stated that he wants to move the embassy to Jerusalem. This is an outright war crime. Not war crime, but it's an abomination. Anybody who's openly stating this shows you they don't have any...
Well, let's see if he does it, rather than just openly state it. And secondly, although you're right, he campaigned on the scrapping of the Iran deal. That's not what his putative cabinet members are now saying. In any case, it's not his deal to break. This is an international deal in the United Nations between the permanent 5 plus 1.
To break it.
He's not stupid enough, maybe, but he's not strong enough, definitely, to break that deal. Simon, it's been good talking to you. Don't be a stranger. Come back again.
Take me home to
From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first. Every decision on trade, on taxes, on immigration, on foreign affairs will be made to benefit American workers and American families. We must protect our borders from the ravages of other countries making our products, stealing our companies, and destroying our jobs.
What does stealing our companies mean, by the way? Does that mean buying our companies? It's very funny, I must say. But you see, this kind of anti-capitalist rhetoric, anti-globalization, is very powerful in America, where tens of millions of workers have been laid off, where people who once were making cars are now making burgers or pancakes, if they're doing anything at all. In states that were once the industrial powerhouse of the world, but which are now officially rust belts, where the mines, the factories, the workshops, the mills have all closed down. And all of it due to the neoliberal version of capitalism that the Clintons and the Obamas stand for. Let's go to West Yorkshire and talk with Rowan. Rowan, welcome.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening to you, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, so hopefully I think I'm going to bring a unique view to Donald Trump.
Okay.
I personally think Donald Trump is going to usher in a new sort of corporate worldview. So I think.
What would be new about that, Rowan?
So I think it's going to be a corporatism that's sort of based around high technology. So if you saw it, I think it was maybe a month ago, there was the big meeting with Larry Page, the Google boss, and sort of very big heads of industry. And I think it's very interesting the time that he's going to be president is 2017 to 2021. And I think in the next maybe 2 decades, we're going to see some absolutely extraordinary scientific and technological advances. And I think being a sort of reality TV man is going to piggyback on these incredible advances such as driverless cars and things like this. And I think he's going to really make himself a name as a sort of a prosperity president with really advanced technologies being introduced. And I think personally, I think he's chosen quite a good time to get into being the president. I think he's going to really try and brand himself as the technology man.
Okay, and, I'd rather get into a driverless car than one driven by him, I must tell you. Rowan in West Yorkshire, thanks for that call. Let's go to Ashley in Torquay. Go ahead, Ashley.
Hello, George. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Go ahead, sir.
George, I was listening. I'm an arm's length political viewer, shall we say?
Mm-hmm.
And also the British media have, so we say, pantomime baddies, people that you set up to fail, and people that the media like to, shall we say, turn into £4. Right, I've made the 4. It was Farage, Boris, Donald Trump, and you.
Well, the others have all done quite well.
This is my question. My question is this. Your turn, George. It's your turn. It's your time. I'm going to get behind you. Forget all those people that go, I am the cat. Forget that. It's your time. So I'm going to get behind you. I want to know what you're going to do this year, because whatever you do is going to work.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. I appreciate that. I'm going to continue doing my television and radio work. I'm going to write. I'm going to make films. And if an opportunity arises, as actuarially speaking they normally do, on the principle that where there's death, there's hope, or where there's imprisonment, there's hope, I may seek to re-enter the House of Commons for the 7th time, which is rather more than Nigel Farage has managed, actually. Yeah. Ashley, thanks for that, pal. Appreciate the call. A texter says, Hi, George. Well impressed with the speech by the Don. The world does need a change, and I know we have a man that will do that. I think of myself and my family first, and it's about time we had someone who can do what we think. This world will be a safer place, because he will do what he says Big Al. Well, we'll see about that. And an email from Roy. George, what are these black bloc thugs dressed in balaclavas with their backpacks on who thought it was a good idea to smash windows and create havoc in downtown Washington today? Who are these people? They were, as you say, the black bloc from an anarchist tradition. I don't know if Donald Trump paid them to do it, but if he didn't, he ought to, because clearly they did much more harm to the enemies of Trump than they did to him. Another Martin says, I think you're wrong, George. I think Donald Trump indicated in his speech today that he wants less war and good relations with Russia. It would be a different story if Hillary got elected, says Martin from Leeds. Well, I don't think I'm wrong, Martin. I think I said exactly that. And the truth is that if he does what he says and resets the dial and de-escalates the tension with Russia, he'll not only be doing America a favour and Russia a favour, he'll be doing the whole world a favour, including Europe, which is in a deep austerity slump, partly because of the economic warfare over the issue of the Ukraine with Russia. All these sanctions and so on have to go. They're nonsensical, they are pointless, they have no chance of changing anything for the better. But there are some troubles on the horizon. The Iran deal would be one of those. The move of the embassy to Jerusalem would be an unbelievably provocative act, which I hope he will not carry through. Clinton promised to do the same, by the way. In fact, all American presidents promised to do the same, but they don't actually do it, citing national security concerns, as well they might. But the biggest problem on the horizon is the wish that he keeps expressing of a confrontation with China. China is the biggest economy in the world, with the biggest army in the world, with the smallest nuclear arsenal of all the nuclear powers in the world, but with enormous strength and power, becoming more strong by the day. So picking a fight with China, which is a close ally of Russia, just seems to be unnecessarily provocative. Perhaps it's just rhetoric, perhaps it's just talk, and it's to prepare the way for a tough negotiation with China. All of that is possible. Frankly, with Donald Trump, anything is possible. Expect anything from a Trump presidency. I noticed that he wore a red tie for the inauguration. Any significance in that? And that the fireworks last night, instead of spelling out USA, spelt out USR, the United States of Russia. There is no end to the reach of Putin. He can even get into the fireworks box at the American inauguration. There's never a dull moment, and there isn't going to be, over the next 4 years. That's for sure. Now, some of Trump's cabinet picks defy all imagination. He's picked somebody to be Secretary of State for Education, who's even more foolish than her boss, Donald Trump, and probably on a par with his predecessor, George W. Bush. I don't think she's going to go through. He's picked as Attorney General someone with a long history of being a racist fink, such that in the 1980s, not an advanced decade, dear listener, he was rejected to be a federal judge because of his record on race relations and his record of racist statements and actions. On the other hand, there have been some less stupid but equally exotic picks. Just what the world needed right now was a US Defense Secretary called Mad Dog, and who insists on being called Mad Dog. General Mad Dog Mateless. Look out for him. And Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, many people find that a very deeply troubling appointment. I myself am strongly in favour of it. I think the last thing America needed was someone already locked in to the prevailing orthodoxy of conflict, invasion, regime change, and so on. Undoubtedly, Trump signalled a new isolationism in his inaugural address today, but I'm in favour of American isolation. I want American isolation. And if I was presiding over a country with as many problems as the United States has, I would have thought a period of attending to one's own business was a very, very good idea. Now, J.T. Williamson from Jackson, Mississippi, in the United States, is a host of the J.T. Show on Super Talk, Mississippi. And it's a well-listened-to show, I must say. I've heard of it even over here. He's probably never heard of me. But let's hear what he has to say about today. JT, if I may call you that, thanks for joining us.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Now tell me, what did you make of the day's events?
Well, you have to understand, I've just recently gotten off of my airship. I've been off for about an hour. So the majority of everything that happened was while I was on the air, and I was doing commentary as it happened and describing a lot of it. We replayed the speech, and of course I'm now home, and I'm watching the end of the inauguration luncheon where they kind of roast the new vice president. We were watching them. They're actually House Chaplain is giving a benediction right now as they're about to adjourn that, and the parade's about to start. But I think, and I saw today, and I think I've seen a humbler Donald Trump today. I really do, to be honest with you. He just commended Bill and Hillary Clinton at the luncheon and thanked them for being there and said he had great respect for both of them. He was also chiding Chuck Schumer, who is now the minority leader of the Senate, also a New Yorker like Donald Trump. So it's been an interesting day. It's almost a little bit different attitude out of Donald Trump. He was fiery in his speech, and I think the people enjoyed that, but it definitely a little more grounded Donald Trump today from what I've seen.
Interesting, and a different note at the luncheon to that which was struck on the podium. He didn't, of course, refer to Clinton. Don't worry, I wouldn't have done so either, because on the principle that I couldn't say anything good about her, I wouldn't wanted to say anything bad on such an august occasion. But he didn't make reference to her in the speech. I thought it was a campaign speech. I thought it could have been given at any time in the last 12 months in any locale.
Well, you can take it however you want. The speech was the speech. It was a highly written speech. It was off of a teleprompter. I mean, that was obvious. But I'll tell you one thing about the speech is totally different from Obama. Trump only referred to himself 3 times in the speech, where every speech we ever have seen, Obama, it's always about Obama. This was about the country and the American people. And, as I've said before, and I've said to other hosts over there in Britain, as I've been on several different shows, the American people sent a mandate through Donald Trump. And I think at this point, even though there are people that very much disagree with Donald Trump, there's a whole lot of people that do agree with him. And I think as a lot of people are starting to say, let's give the guy a chance and let's see what he can do. That was what we were told when Obama came in, and I think he deserves the same respect. And I can assure you, I'm a conservative. I voted for Donald Trump. And if he, if he gets out of line the way Obama did, I'm going to call him out on it as well. I'm an equal opportunity contributor when it comes to this, especially through my airways and through the show that I do. So, but I think Donald deserves. I think Mr. Trump, President Trump, I should say, deserves a chance here, and I think it's going to happen. He's already done a few things this morning. As of some executive orders, and already following through on some things that he said he would do, and he hasn't even gone into the White House yet.
I think he's going to be a much more busy and dynamic president than George W. Bush, who famously went on holiday for a lot of the time prior to the events of 9/11. I don't see Trump doing that much. He seems to me to be somebody who, whether it's good or bad, is going to be getting stuck into the job. What do you think?
Well, I tell you, Donald Trump is a devoted worker. I mean, let's face this, and I want you to think about this. Why would Donald Trump run for the President of the United States? He doesn't need the money. That's obvious. Why would he put himself through the physical torture of the campaign trail? We saw on the campaign trail how hard a worker he is. And that's how he became president. He outworked Hillary Clinton. He went to more places. He stopped more places. He did more campaign stops. He did everything that he could do. He outworked Hillary Clinton. So I don't think you're going to see this guy on the golf course very much. I don't think you're going to see him at one of his luxury resorts very much. I think he means business. I think he plans to work very hard for the American people. And I truly believe that he wants to make this country great again, and I think we can achieve that. We're not a bad country. We have some problems. We've been divided over the past 8 years. We're still somewhat divided, but I do believe that Donald Trump will probably, in the end, go down as more of an independent president as to rather a Republican president.
That not least because a lot of people in the Republican Party tried hard to stop him becoming president, and one or two quite senior ones, like John McCain, have since the election been doing their best to stop him before he gets into the White House. Is that going to change, JT, or will the party rally behind him?
Well, there's a lot of us who are conservatives that don't consider Mr. McCain very conservative nor Republican. He was the biggest mistake we ever had, putting him up to run against Obama the first time. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. He's going to have opposition. There's no matter what. I mean, there's going to be opposition. It's just the nature of the beast. We're a divided country when it comes to Democrats and Republicans.
Well, every country is a divided country.
Sure, and we all are. Yeah, we all are. But I say this, and I've said this much of the week. Like these Democratic House members who sat out of the inauguration, it was about 65 of them. You would think that they would have learned their lesson, and all these Hollywood elitists who are protesting the president and protesting the inauguration. That's exactly those type of actions, that type of mentality is exactly what got Donald Trump elected the president of the United States. And it's almost as if the Democrats are doubling down on making sure that Donald Trump will be reelected after his first term if they continue with these actions. And I believe that's what will happen. I truly do.
Well, I did make the point to an earlier guest that I don't know if Donald Trump paid these protesters today, but he might as well have done, because they did him a lot more good than they did the cause they were nominally demonstrating for.
You're exactly right, and I think it does help Donald Trump. I think I think mainstream middle America finally after 8 years of being told that we weren't a good group of people, we weren't a good country, that we were divided, that we still had racial problems, all this stuff and I don't want to get into the social issues, but the social issues had a lot to do with it, with these transgender issues and these homosexual marriage and all the different types of things that have gone on underneath Democratic control. And I think the mainstream America really turned out for Donald Trump, that said, enough is enough. California and New York don't run this country. Middle America runs this country. We are the ones that are paying the bills with our taxes, and we are the ones that are out working and trying to compete in this country. And I think it had a lot to do with it. And as you said, the protesters, as Donald Trump sees them, in fact, he was talking earlier this week to one of the big news agencies when they addressed to him about the 65 Democratic House members boycotting the election. He basically said, look, can we get their tickets? We really need them. So, I mean, that's just kind of the way Donald Trump has been so far. And it's going to be an interesting 4 years. It's been an interesting 24 hours, that's for sure.
Well, I'm perfectly sure that a good part of the base that voted for Trump is anxious, if not hostile, on some of these social issues. But my guess is that Trump himself is not. It is routine to call him homophobic and racist and all, but I get the impression he's an equal opportunities kind of guy himself. He's a party sort of guy and doesn't much care who's doing it to whom and in whatever permutations.
Well, again, I truly believe Donald Trump, history will remember him as America's first independent president. I believe that. I believe you're going to see that. It's going to anger some conservatives and Republicans, I think. But I think in the end, I think he knows that's probably what he's going to have to do to win. And let's be honest. Donald Trump's been successful. Yeah, he's had some failures here and there. Who hasn't? I have. You have. We all have. If you don't fail, you're not trying. But he has been a very successful man, and I believe he sees this as a challenge, and I believe he wants this challenge, and I believe in my heart that he's going to work as hard as he can for America and for the American people, and make us relevant again. We're kind of irrelevant right now, in my opinion. We're not making anything in this country anymore. We're not manufacturing anything. We're losing jobs. It's amazing the jobs that Donald Trump, just with the hope that he's brought, the people that are reinvesting in the United States of America, the companies that are reinvesting right now, and have been since November, just because of the hope of a Donald Trump presidency. I've been laughing, and a lot of people saying it was a joke, but I've been saying he's created more jobs since November than Obama did in 8 years. And it's turning out that little statement is almost becoming true because of the amount of people that are willing to reinvest into this country. And it's all strictly off of hope right now.
Well, I'm much obliged to you, and I wish you all the best. J.T. Williamson of Jackson, Mississippi, host of the J.T. Show on Super Talk, Mississippi. That's MISSISSIPP.
There should be no fear. We are protected, and we will always be protected. We will be protected by the great men and women of our military and law enforcement. And most importantly, we will be protected by God.
They used to hitchhike from Saginaw. I've come to look for America.
God. He seems to have a soft spot for the United States of America, at least according to the people you often hear from the United States of America. But God has a soft spot for Ireland and Dublin in particular. So let's go there next. Paul is on the line. Paul, welcome to the show.
George, good evening. I haven't spoken to you in many a year. I used to speak to you when you were on another part of the network.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
George, like yourself, I couldn't support Trump or Clinton. Neither of them. My head is just spinning when I hear either of them speak. So this evening when Trump was talking, I mean, like yourself, I wasn't surprised by what he said or how he said it or whatever. You know, I expect no change much in a lot of things. But I want to do two things, George. First of all, I want them to stop bombing countries every 20 minutes. Second of all, this Cold War business, this anti-Russian thing, I want them to stop immediately. Take the tanks, NATO tanks and troops, out of the so-called eastern flank of Sky News, like they call it. It's like something else, Blackadder, and get this sorted and take the heat out. Because every president, George, and I'll get on to Obama in a minute, every president since the Cold War, probably since World War II, with the exception of Reagan, tried to take the heat out of the Cold War. He was the only one to put the heat back into the Cold War, Obama. And that's why you can probably detect me voice here. I'm angry with Obama because he's a great connection with Ireland and all this, and I supported him big style in 2008. But how he morphed into this warmonger, into hypocrisy, based in the last couple of years, George, it's like as if somebody got to him, whether it's a military complex or something got to him, and he just really went completely...
No, I think you're letting him off the hook. I think you're letting him off the hook, Paul. He's a coward. He didn't have the guts to do that which intellectually he knew he ought to do. And so I despise him for that. You know, I'm not going... He's elegant and cool and handsome, and he loves his wife and all the good things about him. I'm not going to fall for this. No. He's got the blood of people all over the world on his hands.
That incident, George, that incident before Christmas in Yemen, that's a war crime. Mm-hmm. Well, he did, but I'll tell you what...
He did one today. He killed 80 people, civilians in Libya today. His last day.
Aleppo would have been trouble. But I'll tell you why, George, because not only did he sell them the jets and sell them the bombs, that mission, when they bombed whatever or whoever they were bombing, doing it the first time is not right. But they did a first run on it, and when the first responders came around, they bombed them again. Now, that mission could only take place because the Saudi Air Force jets were refueled in midair, and they were refueled by the US Air Force, and that order could only come from Obama.
Paul, he had a meeting every Tuesday morning.
Oh, this thing with Tuesday and Clinton, I can't double click. But just, George, before I go completely off, try and explain to me, George, how has the proper left, what I consider you to be part of the proper left, how has it become infiltrated with these neoliberals, as we call it? How have they suddenly...
Well, I'll tell you what happened, Paul. The left lost confidence in its project, in its ideology, and made a detour, which they were able to continue to sound left, but actually they were not confronting the fundamental Grand Canyon that exists in our world between the haves and the have-nots and the have-yachts and all of that. They retreated into identity politics, where you were left if you were right on all the social issues, but you had no intention or any confidence in tackling the overarching issues that affect people of all identities. Paul in Dublin, thanks for that call. Colin is in Oldbury. Let's hear from him. Colin, welcome to the show.
Hello, George. It's been a month. I've been ill over Christmas, but I've been listening to you.
Okay, glad to have you back. Go ahead, Colin.
Well, I heard a little bit I wasn't going to talk much about Obama, but I'm sure the guy that was just on was talking about Obama and whatever. But this Obama, I don't know whether people have known this, but there have been loads of thousands and thousands of troops massing across Poland's border.
Yeah, exactly, Colin, exactly at the spot where Hitler invaded Russia from.
Yeah. And this to me is like poking the bear in the eye.
Yeah.
That's what it is to me. And Putin at the moment is holding his hand and saying, hey, I'm not doing anything yet. I'm waiting until Trump gets in. We're not going to provoke any war yet. We'll just wait and see what Trump does. And that's what I think's going on there. But there's been lots of build-up around that area. I've been watching it. And I just think that's poking the bear in the eye, trying to provoke it. And if war had kicked off, there wouldn't have been a thing today, an inauguration.
Well, that's right.
Obama's president.
That's right. We don't know that he won't, but we know that she would have. So I'm glad that she won't have the chance to do so. And if Trump does what he promised to do, then those tanks and troops will be withdrawn. And I'm sure that that the Russians would reciprocate. I'm sure that the dial can be turned down. The escalating tension of threat and the danger of war, even inadvertent war, and the endless march of sanctions and so on. This has poisoned the international atmosphere. And I feel, I may be wrong, it might be famous last words, but I feel that Trump will start to de-escalate. I feel that he will try to reset the relations with Russia. Thanks for that, Colin in Oldbury. Ragnar says on the Twitter, I don't like Trump, but the media and intelligence agencies against him make me think he is doing something right. And Dave says on an email, whatever you think of Trump, the one thing he has achieved is to bring down and dismantle the Bush and Clinton political dynasty that I think they will never, ever forgive him from. Thanks for that, Dave. Good point. Well brought out. Toby Hobson says on the Twitter, America, your man John from America talks some rubbish. Obamacare was actually Romneycare. It just took a Democrat to get it through. And Crumbs says, will Trump continue to give billions to a foreign power in his quest to putting America first? Did you have $38 billion in mind, my dear Crumbs? Now, coming up after the break, we'll talk to Fox News Radio White House correspondent John Decker. I can't wait for that. Well, let's go straight, in fact, to John Decker, who is the White House correspondent at Fox News Radio, who is in Washington. I'm glad to say he joins us now. John, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, George.
Can you still smell the whiff of cordite and whatever other smells were coming out of that demonstration?
You know, I'm not anywhere near the demonstrations. I'm at the U.S. Capitol. That's where Donald Trump was sworn in as president.
So how far away from that were these demonstrators?
You know, I would say about 2 miles away.
Oh, okay.
So nowhere, nowhere near where I am right now. And in fact, it wasn't until after the swearing in of Donald Trump as the 45th U.S. president that I even learned that there were these protests going on. But I think that they've turned out to be pretty violent. There have been a number of arrests, I think nearly 100 arrests so far. So, I can understand why people are paying attention to it.
Well, it's probably good news for Donald Trump. It's certainly bad news for the opposition to Donald Trump, because not many people like to see concrete being thrown at police officers and windows being smashed and trash being set on fire. It's not very revolutionary in a revolutionary country. It's just kind of petty vandalism.
I think that's right. I think that there are people that take advantage of these situations, anarchists that, wish to disturb the peace. And this is something that they had planned to do, actually, to coincide with the inauguration of Donald Trump. There are also some peaceful protests that are taking place as well. These are protests in which they've received permits to carry out their nonviolent protests, but the ones that you're paying attention to and the ones that I think the news media is paying attention to are the violent ones, the ones that are causing massive vandalism.
Yeah. Now, anybody who turned up or turned on to hear the inauguration speech will certainly not have been moved or persuaded by anything that was in this speech, in the sense that it was a kind of campaign speech, John, rather than a brand new national leader of a mighty country. There was no reaching out to those that perhaps were skeptical about him or even disliked him before today.
I agree with you 100%. I was kind of surprised by the tone of his speech. I thought the tone of his speech was going to be similar to what we heard from him when he won on November 8th.
Yeah, he was much more presidential then, actually.
Yeah, I thought the remarks that he made on November the 8th were unifying, were reaching out to those who didn't vote for him, and I didn't hear that sort of tone coming today during the 20-minute address that he made to literally hundreds of thousands of people that came out to watch him being inaugurated.
And hundreds of millions who have watched it, and history has recorded it. You know, you can still watch and marvel at Jack Kennedy's inauguration address. But as I said right at the top of the show, whilst Mrs. Trump definitely is up there with Jackie, Donald Trump definitely no Jack Kennedy.
Well, I guess, you know, his supporters may disagree with you. That being said, I think that there's no doubt that the one inaugural speech that John F. Kennedy gave is a memorable one. There's so many famous lines that people still recall today. And the speech that we heard from Donald Trump was kind of simple in nature. Like you said, it was a campaign type of speech, a speech that you may have heard at one of the rallies that he gave throughout his presidential campaign and throughout his campaign to win the Republican nomination.
What that says to me, John, just in case you don't know, I'm something of a politician as well as a radio presenter. What that says to me is that nobody helped him write that speech, that it was his speech. Now, maybe that's the future. Maybe this is a man who is more or less an island, a real independent, rather than a party political animal. Maybe it means he's going to be his own man right down to the writing of somewhat banal inauguration addresses.
Yeah, perhaps. I think that it was only 20 minutes in length. You know, it wasn't a particularly long speech compared to the kinds of speeches that we've heard, that I've heard, you know, given on Inauguration Day in the past. That being said, I don't think he can, you know, solely rely on himself to write all of his speeches. He's going to be giving another speech here at the Capitol in a few weeks, which will outline all of his legislative priorities. That's the kind of speech that he really will have to depend on others.
Yeah, definitely. So what happens now, John? From this side of the Atlantic, we get the impression nobody's coming to his ball. The only musicians are country and western musicians, and washed up ones at that. Is that accurate, or is he going to have a half decent celebration over the next 24 hours?
Well, you know, it depends the way you look at things. If you're looking for the kind of star power that often came out for events with President Obama, you're not going to see that over the course of the next 24 hours because, let's face it, Hollywood traditionally has supported Democratic candidates, and even if it was a more establishment Republican, you still wouldn't have, you know, those Hollywood entertainers coming out to entertain at the inaugural balls for a Republican. That being said, I think the people that will attend those inaugural balls will be very pleased with the entertainment, and I think that at the end of the day, they're quite happy that their candidate, their man, got elected president.
And is he a hot dog kind of guy, or a fine dining sort of guy? Sometimes people, Nigel Farage is one of them. They have a man of the people public face, but behind closed doors they're quite the gourmet and the aficionado of the wine list.
You know, we'll have to wait and see. I think he's a little bit of both. He's an interesting person. He does like fast food. He does like eating McDonald's. At the same time, when he's gone out for dinner during this transition period after being elected president, he's gone out to some very fine New York restaurants. So, we'll have to wait and see what kind of president he's going to be, if he's going to dine out at some of the nicer restaurants that you can dine out at here in Washington, D.C.
Is he going to live in the White House, John? We did see some report that he wanted to continue living in his own hotel and just use the White House as the office.
No, that's not going to happen. He's going to live and work out of the White House like other presidents. before him, like President Obama and George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, et cetera. I think that the real question is during this winter time, I think he's going to spend a lot of his weekends down in Palm Beach, Florida, where he has a very nice home and where he likes to vacation. I think that is what we're likely to see over the next few months.
Yes, that's the winter White House, I think he referred to it as.
Well, that's what we'll refer to it as now that he's president. That's right.
John, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for that. John Decker, Fox News radio correspondent from Washington, but unable to smell the cordite. Well, there's big trouble in Washington. There's a lot of arrests. There's a lot of police being attacked with concrete blocks. There's windows smashed. There's fires being lit. But it is 2 miles away, and John was blissfully unaware of it. Thanks, John Decker, for that. Go ahead, Damien.
Good evening, George.
Good evening.
George, I'd like to ask you a question, if I may, which links to the foreign policy of the UK and the United States, and also the inaugural speech given by Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I'd just like to preface my question, George, with very brief excerpts from speeches given by Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, and Barack Obama on the issue of humanitarian intervention.
Okay.
So in 1999, Bill Clinton said, "If somebody comes after innocent civilians and tries to kill them en masse because of their race, their ethnic background, or their religion, and it's within our power to stop it, we will stop it."
Yeah.
Also,
this was the Chicago doctrine that him and Blair enunciated.
Correct. Also, in 1999 in Chicago, Tony Blair said, "The most pressing foreign policy problem we face is to identify the circumstances in which we should get actively involved in other people's conflicts. Acts of genocide can never be a purely internal matter." He reiterated that position in another speech he gave in 2009 in Chicago, and stated his position hasn't changed, George. Then President Obama in 2009 gave a speech in which he said, "More and more, we all confront difficult questions about how to prevent the slaughter of civilians. I believe that force can be justified on humanitarian grounds. That's why all responsible nations must embrace the role that militaries with a clear mandate can play to keep the peace." Mm-hmm. So my question is this, George. If they believe these things, and if Donald Trump truly wants to eradicate terrorism, then why have they not only allowed, but funded and armed successive Israeli governments to carry out the mass slaughter of Palestinians?
Well, not just them, and you know my views on that, but let's take a more left field one. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia, which is Britain's best friend. It's America's best friend. Britain and America arm it, and they provide succor and comfort for its medieval barbarism, its sponsorship of the very radical Islamist extremism that Trump said he would eradicate from the face of the earth today. It is massacring people in Yemen. It murders and crucifies, literally, and beheads its own people. It has crushed its neighbours' attempts to introduce democracy. It has poured fanatics by the tens of thousands into Syria to try and destroy the secular state there and replace it with a Wahhabist fundamentalist regime. That's what gives the lie to these words issued in Chicago and elsewhere by all these leaders, because they don't stop massacre of innocents. They stop only massacres which they define as massacres, even before they've happened, like Libya, for example, in Benghazi, in order to suit their own foreign policy objective. It is pure hypocrisy that they cling to, not high principle, as those words would tend to suggest.
Right. Well, I'm interested to hear your answer, George, and I'm in agreement with you. As I'm sure you can imagine, I've been thinking about it, and I've also come up with an answer of sorts, and that is that, as I see it, I agree that the policy of the UK and the US is completely self-serving, and I think that our modern foreign policy can be traced back to the distinction made by the philosopher John Stuart Mills between civilized societies and barbarians. He argued that those that the West considered to be barbarians had no claim to the right of sovereign protection, and that their status was entirely dependent on the patronage of civilized Western nations. And that gave the Western nations the right to act with impunity against them.
Yes.
And that, George, of course, is the foundation of liberal imperialist thinking. And I think that the problem we face today is that, as you've already outlined, by facilitating torture, providing munitions to the Saudi regime to commit war crimes in Yemen, by occupying other people's countries, and by allowing the mass slaughter of Palestinians.
And don't forget Iraqis. 1 million Iraqis have died as a result of their humanitarian interventionism.
Absolutely, George. Now, the danger for us is that, of course, we are engaging in barbaric acts which are actually generating the enemy, and I firmly believe that it's critical for this country. We can only control what happens within our own borders, but it's critical for us to reverse these positions, not only to eradicate terrorism, but because we need to prevent ourselves from being barbarians, George, and I fear that we're running out of time on this, and we need to act swiftly to reverse these positions.
That I agree with, Damien. A very wise call. Thank you very much indeed. Now, Ken, formerly of the Highlands, is nowadays in Newcastle, but his faith has not been shaken by the move south, as regular listeners will know. Ken, welcome back.
Thank you very much, George. I'm enjoying listening to your programme tonight. However, I've got 2 points I hope you will allow me to make. The first one is about Jerusalem, which you mentioned earlier, and the second one is that God has a foreign policy. So regarding Jerusalem, George, this is the historic facts. For over 3,300 years, Jerusalem has been the Jewish capital of Israel. Jerusalem has never ever been the capital of any Arab or Muslim entity. Even when the Jordanians occupied Jerusalem, they never sought to make it their capital. The Arab leaders did not come to visit Jerusalem. Jerusalem is mentioned over 700 times in the Tanakh, George. That's the Jewish Old Testament. Jerusalem is not mentioned once in the Quran. King David founded the city of Jerusalem. Muhammad never ever came to Jerusalem. And the Jews pray facing Jerusalem. The Muslims pray with their backs towards Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is the eternal city of Israel, George, I'm mixing up with James. That will never be changed. That's the first point I'm making, George, and thanks for allowing me to make that. The second point is very, very important, George, about God has a foreign policy. Did you know that, George?
Well, go ahead and tell us, enlighten us. You've already established that God is an estate agent. Now let's hear how he's a foreign minister too.
God owns the land of Israel, and he gave it to Israel. God has a foreign policy, George. This is his foreign policy, and it's in Genesis chapter 12, verses 2 and 3. He says to Abraham, and through Abraham came Isaac and Jacob to become the father of Israel. God promises, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Now, this is his foreign policy. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. and all the peoples of earth will be blessed through you. Of course, that's through the Messiah. So all those who bless Israel, God has promised to bless them. And whoever curses Israel, they fight against God, and he has promised to curse them. So here we have two very pertinent facts, George, as we move into...
Well, you call them facts. They are, of course, Old Testament Bible thumping, which is what you like to do. They were written by men whose interests were served by the words that you are attributing to God. Almost everything that you said is complete nonsense. It is completely false to imply that for Muslims and Christians, Jerusalem is of no matter. It is completely false that the Prophet Muhammad never went there. It is completely false that the word Jerusalem is not mentioned in the Quran. It is completely false that Muslims pray with their back to Jerusalem. It's just Old Testament tosh, which is all you speak. And I wonder about you sitting up there in Newcastle under your burning bush and fulminating this kind of tosh. But you're very, very lucky that both James and I continue to give you space to spout your hatred. Jerusalem is a city sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. It is a city that is under international law rather more recent than your Old Testament, illegally occupied by force, by military force, and it is you who is the radical, fundamentalist nutcase, not the Muslims that you and Trump refer to so very virulently. And I'm glad I got that off my chest, because, frankly, I can't take much more of Ken in Newcastle. Producer, please note. Sean Caden says, have you ever seen a more contrived anarchist bunch than reported on Sky? Churchillian speech from the Donald. No, Sean. Churchill, in his most hungover, on his worst day, when he had a million other things to do, would have produced a better speech than that. But certainly the anarchists did Mr. Trump a lot of good today. I hope that the other protesters, peaceful, decent protesters that were on the march today in Washington, are suitably angry with them, because all of the reportage that I have seen is about the anarchists and not about the decent protesters with much to protest about in contemporary America. Now, Jeff says, besides Obamacare, which has since become a national nightmare with premiums surging through the roof, what exactly has Obama accomplished besides his eternal narcissism? I think that's a good question. He achieved virtually nothing. And Russell says, I would have shown an interest in this presidency if it was for Bernie Sanders or Dr. Jill Stein. Trump got to number one due to the false promises and lies that we have heard from politicians globally time and time again. This is like Brexit once again. The US has and always will care only about America, says Russell. Well, I think a president who does only think about America, who attends to the deep-seated crises, multiple crises, class, race, orientation, geographic, industrial, political, moral, social crises that afflict America, would be a good thing for America. So if he is an isolationist, well, I'm looking forward to the next 4 years. Keith Vaz is getting the party started in Stoke-on-Trent. Believe it or not, Jim, the washing machine salesman, is in charge of choosing Labour's candidate for a crucial by-election against Paul Nuttall of UKIP. What could possibly go wrong? And Donald Trump's presidency has begun. we're in for a roller coaster. Now, Andrew Spears says, I think there'll be a scandal quite quickly in his presidency, which he will struggle to deal with and to discredit him. Well, of course, they all get caught up in scandals. My guess is that Trump is better placed to withstand such scandal because everybody has such a low opinion of his moral standing in the first place, short of being found quite unexpectedly in bed with John McCain or Barack Obama. I'm not sure that any such scandal can touch him. I've just been looking, speaking of scandal, a wonderful video on Twitter of Hillary catching Bill gazing and gazing and gazing at, I must say, the rather beautiful Mrs. Trump, who was exquisitely attired today in the Jackie Kennedy mode, and he couldn't take his eyes off her, and Hillary spotted it. So there'll be trouble indoors tonight there. But who should I turn to talk about these matters but the wonderful, really loquacious, vivacious Heidi Harris, my radio friend from Nevada, Las Vegas, United States of America. Heidi, thanks for joining me again.
Hi, Joe.
Did you see that video to which I refer?
I can't wait.
We've got a bad line. We'll have to re-establish it quickly because I must get your take as a woman and as a pundit on that very important matter. We are talking, of course, about Donald Trump, but not only. There were other big issues this week. There was the Brexit speech of Theresa May, putting to rest the idea that Britain had no negotiating position. We now know that it does, and that they're prepared to walk away if they don't get a decent deal from the European Union, and that would be damaging for Britain, but it would also be very damaging for the European Union. That is undoubtedly true. The by-elections are being called on Monday, so we can talk about them tonight, but we can't talk about them next week. So you might want to have a say on the fact that somebody who was in the campaign against Jeremy Corbyn last summer is now to carry Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party banner in the by-election in Copeland. But don't worry, there'll be a fine candidate, no doubt, emerges in Stoke because Keith Vaz is going to pick them. Heidi Harris is back on the line. I hope more clearly. Heidi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry about that. My phone died.
Okay. It's very likely that you've been very busy today, so I won't detain you for too long. I just wondered if you'd seen that video to which I referred of Bill Clinton gazing at the rather beautiful Mrs. Trump and Hillary Clinton catching him, and if you thought there'd be trouble indoors tonight.
I'm not sure if they ever sleep in the same room, do they?
Well, perhaps not. Perhaps not.
Probably not, but I haven't seen that video, but now that you mention it, I'm going to look for that. I was focused on looking at her face today as she was trying to sit behind Donald Trump and maintain a smile. I got quite the kick out of that.
It was quite courageous of her, to be fair, to come. Perhaps she didn't have much choice. Trump was kind to her in the inauguration lunch, but he resolutely ignored her presence on the podium, and that was part of what was really a highly partisan performance by Trump. It was really a stump speech. Not a single line of it will live in history in the way that some previous inaugural addresses have.
Well, that may be true, but I was just doing a liberal cable news show a while back, earlier this afternoon, and they were all focused on why Donald Trump didn't talk about Brexit. Why didn't he talk about China? Why didn't he talk about any kind of foreign policy things? But to me, as the president, he's got to address the American people first. And maybe nothing he said was that memorable, but that's kind of typical of him. Kind of a stump speech, but I think he wanted Americans to feel as if he would put their interests first. And I think a lot of people in America have felt for a long time as if the president didn't. They were too busy shaking hands with other countries, sending jobs overseas with their policies that forced jobs overseas. And so Americans want to hear that we're going to put America first for a change.
Well, I myself am looking forward to a period of arrest from American presidents. If they stay at home and attend to the very deep-seated problems which manifestly exist in your country, that'll be good for America and good for the world, Heidi.
Well, I'm sure Europe is tired of President Obama walking around and wagging his finger at other countries and trying to tell them how to live. That was never his job. And even Donald Trump came out today and said very clearly, we're not going to tell other countries how to run things, but we're going to protect America. And I thought that was great.
Yeah, I think so too. So what happens now? We've got a rather low-key 24 hours ahead, don't we? There'll be no big Hollywood stars. There'll be no musicians or artists of note. How are you going to survive a 24-hour diet of country and Western music?
Well, we kind of like country and Western music, and it's kind of a shame that celebrities felt as if they couldn't perform during this inauguration at any of these parties because they were going to be chastised by some of their base. I mean, that's ridiculous. I would never have punished a celebrity who performed for Barack Obama. It just wouldn't cross my mind. And I don't understand the intolerance. And some of these people have had major threats against them by their so-called fan base when they were going to perform. They backed out, and that's just silly to me.
Well, that's the bottom line with most of these people in the last analysis, Heidi. They don't want to lose money, and Hollywood and California and New York City are really pretty hostile to Trump. But if you look at the map, of course, most of the rest of the country went his way, including these crucial Rust Belt so-called states. Now, he's really promising big things to them, to make America great again, to put it back to work, to stop the export of jobs and so on. If he doesn't deliver on that, then the disappointment might turn really very ugly.
Well, I think that most people are disappointed in the president. President Barack Obama made a lot of promises that he didn't keep. Every president does. Donald Trump obviously can't stop a company from going overseas and taking their jobs there. But if he has policies that are more favorable to them staying in the United States, then companies will. They would rather be here than go someplace else to do their manufacturing. So the one thing Donald Trump does understand is business. He may not be an expert on foreign policy. Obviously, he's not. But he understands business and regulations and those kind of things. So if he can make some real improvements with regulations, that would save a lot of American jobs, and that would impress a lot of people.
How is the cabinet building going? I mean, looked at from here, I must say, Trump's nominees are going to be a difficult sell in some cases. I watched the lady, is it Davos on education?
Betsy DeVos.
The education. She's going to be Minister for Education, but frankly, she didn't seem to know a great deal about education. It's going to be a bit tough to get people like that through the Congress, isn't it?
Well, the problem is Harry Reid changed some of the procedures. They don't need the Democrats. That's the problem for them. They can, huff and puff all day long, and they can try to drag this process out, but ultimately the Democrats are not necessary to get these nominees through. So Chuck Schumer can say anything he wants to, but he's got no power.
Yeah, but will the Republicans vote en bloc for these nominees?
I think they will, because these people seem very palatable to Republicans. Betsy DeVos doesn't have experience as a teacher, but she understands education. She's given a lot of money to it. She's done a lot of things to make education better in her home state of Michigan. And she understands that things have to change. And sometimes it's better to put somebody in who can see it from the outside. Sometimes the folks who've been inside for too long just don't see it clearly anymore. So the whole point of the Trump administration, in the minds of a lot of Americans, those who voted for him, was to shake things up. They don't want the status quo. So how about some people who aren't entrenched in these various industries? How about that? I think it might be worth a change.
What can you tell us, Heidi, about the new ambassador to Britain? He's a very rich man, the owner of, I think, a football team, and a friend of Trump's. Obviously, that's the way these things work. Is he a big figure in the United States?
Not particularly to most people. I think ultimately, when you're the president, when you put your people in place in your cabinet, you want to put people you trust, people you know, or people other folks around you trust. Because the good thing about Donald Trump is that he, as an executive, is probably very good at delegating. Now, Donald Trump's the kind of guy who's got a short attention span. He runs from one thing to the other, which a lot of big executives do. So you put people around you who understand specific aspects of the business, or in this case, the government, better than you do, and you take their advice. That's the whole point. As a president, you're kind of an executive. You're an administrator. You're not the king. You're not making every decision. Ultimately, it rises and falls with you. But you should get good information and good advice from other people. So if he does that successfully, then I think he can have a great administration. I really do.
This fellow, Woody Johnson, he's from the Johnson & Johnson family, the new ambassador to Britain. It's a bit puzzling. I'm not against it, by the way. In fact, I'm probably in favour of it. But it's odd for us because we have professional diplomats who schmooze and oil the wheels and so on. We're not used to, in this country, except from the United States, people who are really made ambassadors to important places, as we still are, I think, whose only real qualification is that they're pals of the president.
Well, that's true to a certain extent. And to your point about people who are professional schmoozers, there's obviously a lot of that. But, you know, the American people originally, people like George Washington, many of our founders, they were serving for a period of time, and then they would go back to something else. They would go back to their business, back to their farm, back to whatever it might be. And I'd like to see more of that in Congress. I'd like to see term limits. We're not going to have that because, you know, the foxes are running the hen house. But ultimately, the objective is not in America to become a lifelong politician. So it's good to have somebody who understands things from a different perspective. And, you know, if Johnson does a good job as an ambassador to the UK, why not? I mean, basically, that's a schmooze job, as you mentioned, but somebody with business experience, maybe it's a great fit.
Well, you know that someone once said an ambassador is someone sent to lie abroad for his country. And I suppose you can do that whether you're a professional liar or an amateur one. Heidi Harris in Las Vegas, a pleasure always to talk to you. You always put a spring in my step. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the mother of all talk shows.
At the bedrock of our politics will be a total allegiance to the United States of America. And through our loyalty to our country, we will rediscover our loyalty to each other. When you open your heart to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice.
What does that even mean? Now, a number of you are asking me on Twitter, how come Keith Vaz is in charge of the selection of the Labour candidate in the Stoke-on-Trent by-election? Some have said surely the local members will decide. Well, it's like this. By a measure, a variety of means, the selection is rigged. In Copeland, it was an all-woman shortlist. In some other cases, the constituency party will be suspended because a brick didn't get thrown through a window, or because a non-existent homophobic remark was made, or a supposed outbreak of anti-Semitism amongst Labour members causes the constituency to be suspended. By choosing the shortlist, which is what Mr. Vaz is going to be doing, you decide from amongst whom the candidate can be selected. So, in the case of Copeland, a councillor who was campaigning to overthrow Jeremy Corbyn in the summer has been selected from an all-woman shortlist to be the candidate. So look at it from Corbyn's point of view. If Corbyn's Labour Party holds Copeland, he's got another Blairite backstabber sitting behind him in Parliament. If they don't hold it, it's his fault. And in the case of Stoke-on-Trent, against the leader of UKIP, well, Mr. Vaz will be decisive in deciding who the candidate is. That's why I've been telling you, over these last weeks and months, there is going to be no big deselection. The next election will be fought overwhelmingly, almost exactly, by the same Labour MPs that have caused Corbyn so much trouble over this last period. And some of you wonder why I am frustrated and at the end of my patience with it all. Let's hear from Jonathan in London on Donald Trump. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hi, George. Good afternoon. Good evening. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm enjoying it. Go on.
That's good to hear. Look, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump at all. Just due to the fact of what he said to the inner city people from the inner cities. The rhetoric he used on when he was demonstrating on TV was outrageous. You know, he blamed them for their situation. He blamed them for their poverty. He blamed them for being shot by the police. And I've just heard people on your radio show earlier on, the guy, the American dude from Missouri, saying giving him props, saying that he's the president, he's better than Barack Obama. Although Barack Obama, in fair due, didn't do anything for Afro-Caribbean people, for African-American people. But I don't think Donald Trump is the answer. This America's only going to get worse. It's only going to get more divided.
But black people, Jonathan, black people were being shot down in the streets of America under a black president at a greater rate than any other presidency.
No, that's not necessarily true. Black people have been shot in America since been getting shot since the 80s and the 70s by people. Just more cameras due to social media.
No, there's more. No. There's more numbers. No, there's more numbers. Obama came to power saying yes we can, and left power with Black Lives Matter having to be on the march because of the sheer scale of the industrialized brutality against black people under a black democratic president.
No, that's not necessarily true. That's kind of true. It's a half true, but it's not necessarily true.
Tell me what the other half is that's not true.
And Clinton. So when Clinton was in presidency, black people was being sent to prison on record number scale.
Exactly. I was just about to add that point. Bill Clinton sent a small nation of black people to prison with the 3 strikes and you're out policy. So between Clinton and Obama, don't tell me they've done anything for black people, because they haven't.
I wasn't saying that. I don't like talking around myself, but I'm not saying that Barack Obama, George, this is my argument, George, and you probably agree with me with this one. I don't think... I'm a Bernie Sanders guy. That was my guy. I love Bernie. You know, I think he was the solution to America right now.
I agree.
But again, he was stitched up, so we wouldn't go into that. But I don't think your other viewers and your other people who's been speaking on your show, which said that Donald Trump is the answer, they are having a laugh.
Well, we'll see. We'll see, Jonathan. It's only the first day. Let's hope we both survive it. Thanks for that call. Gerald is in London on a different matter. He's on the line now. Go ahead, Gerald.
Good evening, George. I wanted to call. I actually called in last week in regards to Theresa May making quite a strange speech saying that she was going to bring in caps for executive pay. And I believe, correct me if I was wrong, the question you were saying is, you know, how could she do this? That was kind of a part of the topic of conversation. My strong belief is that for our economy and employment and everything else down the supply chain to happen, is that there does have to be a massive change to executive pay. Even if that means that we're told that all these companies are going to lose, we're going to lose the best talent. And it should be very simple how the structure's worked out. It should be the taxable profit that a company pays. So if they earn £100,000 profit and they pay the corporate tax, which I believe is 15%, 15,000, of that 85,000, that's where bonuses can be taken from. But if no tax is not paid, then no bonus. In terms of the executives, pay specifically, if you're talking about a baseline salary, then I think it should be not allowed to be any more than 5 times the median of the salary of the workers. And that would mean that if you work for a bigger company and the chief executive of a bigger company, you'd get more money because you'd have more management positions, and it would be in your interest to have people earning more money. I just wondered what your thoughts might be on that.
Well, I'm certainly not against it, and I may have been wrong in my exasperation about Jeremy Corbyn bringing this matter up on the day he was supposed to be changing Labour's line on the EU and the so-called freedom of movement of Labour.
Corbyn, not Theresa, I apologise.
I think that Corbyn has sparked a national discussion about the gross disparity in income and wealth that exists in the country, and that's what he should be doing. And if he succeeds in doing that, he'll be doing everybody a favour. I'm still not convinced that caps are the best way to do it. It seems to me the best way to do it is through progressive taxation. The more you earn, the more you pay. But because most rich people avoid tax, some of them evade it, but avoid it by a variety of means, we should also be taxing people's wealth, not just their income, because people's wealth is a separate thing from their income. So if you live, as many the rich people do, if you live in a 150 million, believe me, I'm not exaggerating, 150 million apartment in Knightsbridge, then you ought to be paying far more tax on that wealth. If you've got a big yacht moored in Bournemouth or on the coast somewhere, you should be paying far more tax on that. You should be paying more tax on the land you're buying, on the wealth you're enjoying, as well as on the income that you're earning, because there's no civilization without taxation. You can't have a civilized country if you don't have taxation. And if the richest people are dodging their taxation, then that means they're enjoying the civilization without paying their fair share of the dues for it. What do you say?
I think it's a good idea in terms of in part of what you're saying, but I would say that the houses in Belgravia or down in St John's Wood, near where I live in Kilburn, which is slightly different. That needs to come actually more for council tax. And if you have a house that's left empty, then tax it, but that's a different point. The reason why I think, and I would obviously love to say that, but I know you're short on time, I think that wages do have to be a tax and not people's wealth, because otherwise you will get into the argument of charging people twice and attacking it from a PAYE point of view is much better, because that would stop the yachts getting made in the first place.
Well,
if they have,
I'm not sure, Gerald. I mean, for example,
and they're non-domicile, it's almost impossible to enforce that.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree on that, but the principle you enunciate, and Corbyn enunciated, is one, of course, I agree with. I think I said last week that I have long believed in the wisdom of Aristotle's view, all these millennia ago, that the richest should not be more than 3 times richer than the poorest. And that would be the direction of travel, albeit a slow and long journey, that if I were running the country, I'd be embarked upon. So I'm not against it in principle. But if you say, as Corbyn's initial statement on the sofa of Piers Morgan seemed to say, that you will not be allowed to earn above a certain amount in Britain. Well, I mean, for a start, as I pointed out, every professional footballer at the top of the game in England would have to leave, because they would undoubtedly fall.
We keep talking about wanting English players to come through, you know.
No, they do. Well, they do, Gerald, but they also want to watch the Arsenal. They also want to watch Zlatan. And now, if Zlatan earns more in a week than any cap could possibly permit.
I know. What I'm saying is, it's not a cap. It's just to have it relative to the.
No, that's what you're saying. But that's not what Corbyn said.
Okay, of course. Sorry, I apologise. But I think that the good point would be that it would be inclined for chief execs to raise the lower wages, so you wouldn't have people on minimum wage, and that would have the Keynesian economic effect, because there'd be more disposable income. That was I love Corbyn, but I think a cap is just too rudimental. But thank you very much for...
No, thank you, Gerald. I'm not happy that Donald Trump is the president, but I'm very happy indeed that Hillary Clinton isn't. He cannot be worse than Clinton, or at least at this moment, we cannot say that he can be worse than Clinton, whereas with her, there was no room for doubt. To her credit, I should say, she made it clear the kind of presidency that she would operate. It would have been war, war, and more war. It would have been a continuation of the policy of neoliberal economics and neoconservative foreign policy. It would have been war here, there, and everywhere. And in particular, the confrontation between the US and Russia would have stepped up to extremely dangerous proportions. Now, if you think that there's anything progressive or left-wing about NATO putting its tanks and its troops on the Russian border, then frankly, you need to go and take a good look at yourself. If you think that a president, Hillary Clinton, who promised all of that and promised nothing to industrial America, in fact was jointly and severally responsible for the so-called free trade agreements that beggared American manufacturing and the American working class, if you think that there's anything left-wing or progressive about a person like that, then you're making a very grave mistake. Donald Trump didn't win the presidency. The Democratic Party lost it. They lost it when they stitched up Bernie Sanders, who all the data shows would have comfortably beaten Donald Trump and would have attended to the issues that Trump identified, but which Sanders might very well be more likely to have dealt with. So, if you are in any way askance at my attitude towards Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, believe me, it's not because I'm in love with the giant Bulgarian. This Bulgarian who has defiled the English language, who has paraded a level of sexism and brutishness which is very difficult for any sensible, decent person to accept. It's not because I love this Bulgarian. I really, really don't. But I tell you what, Obama was no better for all his elegance, for all his poise, for all his good looks and his nice family life. He killed a lot of folks. He tortured a lot of folks. He promised to shut Guantanamo Bay, and he didn't. So, my view is, let's see what happens with Trump. If he lives up to his campaign promises, then he'll be a good thing for America, and he'll be a good thing for the world. If he doesn't, and it's a big if, I'll grant you, then I'll tell you what, there'll not be many politicians in the rest of the world queuing up to tell us that we must follow the foreign policy lead of Donald J. Trump. Now, let me take some of these tweets that have come in. Gav, these morons who are rioting saying Trump is evil are in fact the evil ones destroying other people's property. Ironic, says Gav. And Nat says, I'm a bit nervous about ringing, so I thought I'd put what I want to say to you in an email. Personally, I think Donald Trump is going to be awesome as president. He is going to be a busy man. Well, I think he is probably going to be quite dynamic and quite busy. But awesome, well, I'll have to reserve judgment on that. And an SMS says, good evening, Mr. Galloway. Did you catch the Chinese Premier Xi Jinping's speech at Davos around the same time Mrs. May was rubbishing free trade while supporting it? Well, I rubbish free trade. Just because you put the word free in front of something doesn't make it a good thing. I'm in favour of protecting our industries. I'm in favour of buying British. I'm in favour of priming the pump with deficit expenditure, as Trump is going to do and show that it can be done. I'm in favour of using quantitative easing to distribute wealth to people who will spend it on their own economy and on their own business. I'm in favour of state intervention in the so-called free market. Don't imagine that just because something's called free, that it's a good thing. Stuart emails. The arrogance of Hillary Clinton, describing Trump's working class supporters as deplorables, cost her the election, says Stuart from London. Well, I doubt if it cost her the election, Stuart, but it certainly didn't help her. Simon Brian Anderson says if or when Trump goes to Russia and talks peace with Putin, how will the Liberals react if the Russians show him love? This is a very big and important question. You see, for decades, British and other governments have gone around the world threatening people with America's army. If America is making peace with countries like Russia, what are the British going to do? Are they going to try and continue, like they did at Suez in 1956, in having a policy even more belligerent, hawkish, violent, interventionist, aggressive than the policy of the United States? That will not be allowed to happen. The Americans will not allow it. So it would be wise for the British government and others, and for their media echo chamber, to start turning down the rhetoric on issues that Trump is going to wrong-foot them on. Matthew White says, I suspect Trump's promises will be as genuine as Ronald McDonald's promise to look after your cow when you go on holiday. That's very good. I wasn't aware that McDonald's made that promise, but I wouldn't leave my cow, if I had one, in the care of McDonald's, and I am not going to imagine that Donald Trump's going to keep me safe. My overarching point, Matthew, is that, as I pointed out the other day in relation to something very stupid that Paul Mason said on BBC Question Time, there is no free world. And if there was, the United States of America would not be its leader. We should stop imagining that the United States is our leader. Never mind our father. It's about time we stood on our own 2 feet and recovered some national dignity, which I hope is what lies ahead. Ragnar says, Theresa May Brexit is dangerous. It's now in the Tories' hands to turn the UK into an unregulated tax haven for the rich. Well, only if the British people vote for them. If the British people vote them out, we can have a different kind of government. And that's the difference, Ragnar. We can, and regularly do, vote British governments out. But we can never vote out anybody that runs the European Union. They are unelectable, unelected. We don't vote for them, and we can't remove them. And that's why Brexit is a good idea. And Mark says, what do you think is on Russia's eastern border? All this old sphere of influence nonsense is a Cold War relic. It was so lacking in poetry, so lacking in history, so lacking in literary value. It was just a standard, unscripted Donald Trump campaign speech. And that didn't rise to the occasion. I'm not one of those who is in love with the idea of hugging your enemies and pretending they're not your enemies. That's just hypocrisy. But there must be a section of the American population that wanted to hear something gentle and nice and visionary from their new president. But he didn't care, or perhaps didn't have the capability of offering that in this, possibly the most important speech that he will ever give. The one thing I am sure of, nobody will play that speech, not in 60 years' time, like they play Jack Kennedy's inaugural address, and not even in 1 year's time, because there was literally nothing memorable about it except its utter unmemorableness. Lee is in Caldecott in Monmouthshire. Let's hear from him. Go ahead, Lee.
Hiya.
Hi.
See, I totally believe in Donald Trump.
Yeah. Tell me why.
I believe in him. I always have. I called the election. I said to my friends, he's going to win. And he bloody won.
Yeah, well, I did the same. So what's your point, caller?
Well, he's a businessman. He's going to run it like a business. He's going to make friends with people that were previously enemies with.
Okay, but there's not many signs that that's the sort of businessman he is.
He is that kind of businessman. He's a multi-billionaire.
Well, we don't know that because he won't publish his tax returns.
Well, he's obviously hiding something. I don't doubt that.
I think he's hiding how little money he's got, not how much.
That's what, yeah, well, I believe that. I do believe he's probably got less money than he makes out. But I believe he will be a great president.
Well, I mean, that's as rational a belief as that there's green pigs flying past my window. What has he shown you so far that justifies him being described as someone who's going to be a great president?
I think he's going to be good. I do believe he's going to bring jobs back to America.
But you're not giving me much to go on here, Lee. Look, Jack Kennedy was a great president. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a great president.
So we hear.
None of the others have been great presidents, and most of them had more chance of becoming one than Donald Trump, in my view.
Well, we'll see.
Of course we will. That's part of the fun. Okay, Lee, your faith is duly noted. I hope you're right. Alan is in Birmingham. Go ahead, Alan.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway.
Good evening, sir.
I want to relate to something you said at the start of the show.
Sorry, say that again. Say that again.
I want to relate to something you said at the beginning of the show about Obama.
Okay.
He's killed 80 people in Libya.
Today. Just today.
Yeah, it begs me to ask the question, how many people will Trump kill?
How many people did who kill?
How many people will Donald Trump kill during his presidency?
Well, we don't know that, but we do know how many Hillary Clinton killed and promised to go on killing.
Yeah.
That's why I'm happy that she's not the president, because there was no room for doubt about her. She made it her campaign. She mentioned Russia more often in the presidential debates than any other subject or topic, without realizing that the unemployed and the underemployed in places like Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania were not blaming the Russians for closing their factory. They were blaming her neoliberal economic policies.
I mean, Hillary Clinton, she just wanted to start another Cold War when the American people said, no way, Clinton, we don't want you in charge. We want a man who wants progressive change. That's why we voted for Trump.
Well, they want to change. You see, he said, I'll make America great again. And she said, America's already great. Well, for scores of millions, America isn't great. America's a place where, if you're lucky, you get a job flipping burgers or pancakes, when once upon a time you put a blue-collar shirt on and you went to work in a factory making real things.
And also, it'd be interesting to see what the special relationship between Trump and Theresa May will be.
Oh, I don't think it'll be much of a special relationship. His special relationship is with Nigel Farage and Aaron Banks and so on. He knows very well that Theresa May is a stopgap non-entity as British Prime Minister. I don't think he'll give a moment's thought to Theresa May.
Well, like I say, it's rude to keep the man when he's just taken up a position.
All right, look, I need to let you go, Alan, because we're almost out of time. Marie McFarlane sends the best tweet of the night. We live in interesting times. Republican capitalists vilifying Trump capitalists and Putin capitalists. Marie, you have hit the nail on the head. Brexit and Trump represent a gigantic rupture inside the ruling capitalist class on both sides of the Atlantic, in the United States and in Europe. It's a gigantic rupture because the old world order could not go on as before. And that is what's really interesting about this period. Now, when I read about the girls wetting themselves with delight in a Moscow hotel room at the presence of Donald Trump, there was only one song that crossed my mind. And I'm glad to say my clever colleagues through the glass have managed to locate it is from a long time ago, and it's what I would advise President Trump to follow over the next period.
I've just come down from the Isle of Skye. I'm no very big and I'm awful shy, and the lassies shout when I go by, Donald, where's your trousers? Let the wind blow high, let the wind blow low, through the streets in my kit I'll go. All the lassies say hello, Donald, where's your trousers? A lassie took me to a ball and it was slippery in the hall.